Good morning. This is Dylan Jovine from Behind the Markets. Happy Tuesday. Today is October 8th. Today I want to talk about what the hurricane season can teach us about a debt crisis. Like me, many of you probably own your own home. And in the past couple of years, when you've gotten your insurance premiums for renewal, you've opened the mail, you've looked at them, you said, my God, these are so expensive. It's almost like a slap in the face how high insurance premiums for your home have become. Well, all insurance for your car too, but specifically for the home is what I'm talking about today. Now, because insurance premiums are so expensive, a lot of folks haven't been able to afford insurance. Whether it's home insurance, flood insurance, they're just underinsured. Okay, a lot of those folks got hit hard by Hurricane Helene last week, and they're probably going to get hit hard by Hurricane Milton this week. Now, that's one side of the problem. The other side of the problem is insurance companies, to make insurance more affordable for the most amount of people, have also gutted their policies. So it's been widely reported lately, a lot of folks who were able to afford their insurance didn't read the fine print. And there's a lot of exceptions. These are a lot of gutted policies there. So a lot of people don't even know they're walking around underinsured. Now, the United States has an alarming amount of debt. We are headed to a debt crisis, as we've talked about, as Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan, as many other wise people have talked about and warned about in recent weeks, months, and a couple years. So what does this all mean for a debt crisis? How can hurricane season create a debt crisis or exacerbate a debt crisis? And what does that mean for you? This is very, very important stuff. Right now, nobody really worries about houses that get knocked down and run around because everybody knows the federal government is kind of like a backstop. We all have that kind of understanding in the back of our head that, you know what, the federal government will declare a disaster area and basically take care of most of this stuff, if not all of it. Okay? Now, as the United States gets higher and higher in debt, it will limit its ability to do that. We won't be able to afford to do that anymore. So we take for granted that the government can take care of us when a natural disaster occurs. But we are not that far away from a situation where the U.S. government might not be able to afford to take care of a problem like this when a disaster comes in. Think about that. That's because our debt, we do this by debt, by selling debt to investors. And investors have had problems buying our debt. I mean, we've talked about this a lot. Our debt has been giving us a few warning signs with some investors around the world. They're like, you guys have too much debt relative to your GDP. So that's a very, very big problem. Now, some folks might say to that, well, you know what? If you can't afford insurance, it's too bad for you. I've taken care of myself. I'm a self-made man. I've totally taken care of my business, and I've covered myself, and I read my insurance policy, and I got the right stuff, and I was able to afford it, and that's great. But let's face it. If the government wasn't able to borrow money to pay for these crises, what would happen? Well, the government would try to pay for them somehow, and they would pay for them by printing money to send checks. So that would create crazy inflation, which would affect even the people who can afford to pay and insure their homes. My point is, we have one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel with debt. And this is a very real example of what would happen if our government could not borrow any more money, if this actual debt problem turns into a debt crisis. We take for granted in this country that our government, they'll just pay for it. We're the United States of America. We have the biggest economy in the world. We're blah, 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 blah. But there's a finite level of appetite around the world for our debt. So what I'm saying to you is, as we wade through this hurricane season, think about if we were not able to issue debt to pay for all these natural disasters, what would the government do? Well, I'll tell you, they print more money. And in printing more money, that would cause inflation. In causing inflation, that would cause social instability. Never forget this. Communism gave rise, the breeding ground, the fertile ground for communism was war, inflation, unemployment, and of course, the wealth gap. The wealth gap got so big that people just were like, this is just crazy. That was the fertile ground that allowed communism to spring. Now, in this country, we've had such a big wealth gap that communism itself has been growing a little bit with the young generation. You add all these other things, and we can see a lot of political turmoil, which is what's been talked about by people who are much, much wiser than me, who've been at this longer than me, who are older than me. Our elders have been warning us about this in recent months, and it pays to listen, because if we couldn't afford this stuff anymore, if we couldn't afford to sell debt, nobody wanted to buy our debt, natural disasters, you'd be on your own, basically. You'd be on your own. Now, I want to close with a plea to you guys listening at home. I have a recommendation for a charity that we're going to give money to. I invite you all to join me. This was recommended by one of our members. He says it's the best boots on the ground charity for the hurricane victims of Helene that he knows of. So please, I urge you to donate. The link is in the email. Have a wonderful day. By the way, I might be recording this from home tomorrow. The hurricane, the Milton, seems like it's going to hit us in Florida. So who knows? I might be here, I might be there, but it promises to be a very eventful week. Have a good day.